Israel is on a war footing, fighting on two fronts as it prepares to commemorate the first anniversary of the October 7th terror attacks that plunged the region into chaos. For the first time, Israel has struck northern Lebanon. Iran attacked Israel, and Israel's prime minister will make zero promises that his country won't attack Iranian nuclear facilities. Joining me now is retired Major General Giora Eiland from Tel Aviv. General, thank you so much for joining us today. I know you served as the IDF's head of plans and operations. You were also the head of the National Security Council for Israel under Ariel Sharon. A lot of people out there wondering about the possibility of the Israeli military carrying out strikes against Iran's nuclear facilities. What do you think the likelihood is of that happening?
I think that if no real change might occur, then Israel will probably strike back in the next few days. The targets are not necessarily going to be the nuclear facilities, which are well protected, but Israel can cause real significant damage to Iran if we attack other possible targets. And the most maybe attractive ones are the energy facilities. Iran economy relies very much on the export of oil, and export of oil is a very, very sensitive and vulnerable target. And Israel can cause a significant damage to this sector, which is not less important than the nuclear facilities. And of course, we don't know. And there could be, of course, military facilities, especially the air defense systems of Iran and some others. We have to remember that Iran attacks Israel twice in the past 6 months. In both cases, they launched hundreds of rockets and missiles against Israel. And I think that Israel should not let something like this become to be, let's say, a regular one that might be repeated again and again, as the Iranians probably plan to do.
That's sort of the next question I wanted to ask you about. What do you anticipate Iran's response might be, and is there a possibility that this escalates to a direct war between Iran and Israel?
Well, in a way, there is already some kind of direct war between Israel and Iran. We are speaking about a huge, let's say, territorial or geographic distance between Israel and Iran. So the volume of activities is relatively low, but we are already in a full military confrontations with them. So far, Iran preferred to use only their proxies in the region. We are fighting simultaneously against 6 Iranian proxies in the region. And so far, Iran enjoyed to sacrifice the lives of others, Lebanese, Yemen, Palestinians, Syrian, Iraqis, and others, but to avoid any real damage to itself. And they drove themselves to be in a situation where we have no other choice but to strike back. So the Iranian people might feel, I would say, let's say, the cost of the war, and not only the proxies of Iran in the region.
There's long been conflict in the Middle East, obviously, but it feels like it has a different tone and tenor now. Israel finds itself in a two-front war. Clearly, there has been a significant and dramatic escalation and breadth in Israel's strikes on Hezbollah and Lebanon, still fighting with Hamas in Gaza, and now the questions about Iran. Some analysts say they think that Israel is in a place where it believes these are existential threats, and it's willing to go further than ever before to try to eliminate them. And that's part of why we're seeing that continued and accelerating pressure instead of a lessening. I'm curious to know what your view is on Israel's strategy, and if this is sort of seen as the red line has been crossed and Israel's opportunity to eliminate these threats.
I think that Israel should pursue to reach some kind of a political settlements in all areas, including Gaza and Lebanon. And if I want to be more specific, I would say that in regard to Gaza, we should agree to the end of the war in Gaza, that practically is in a very, very low volume today. Of course, only for a full return of all the Israeli hostages in one phase. This is about Gaza, but at the same time, Israel will require that any attempt to rebuild Gaza after that war would depend very much on the ability to demilitarize Gaza. And speaking about Lebanon, we have to remember that there is a UN resolution 1559 that calls to dismantle all the militias in Lebanon, including Hezbollah, and I think the time has come to exercise or to implement this decision. We have to remember that this is maybe the main, let's say, lesson or conclusion that we derive from the past war, that Israel cannot bear a situation where a very, very strong military forces, Hamas, Hezbollah, or others, that enjoy so much Iranian weapons, technology, and other devastating capabilities, are sitting or standing so close to Israel. When I say so close, it is a matter of few hundred meters from Israeli civilians, villages and towns. This situation is not going to be repeated. And any political solution that can guarantee that these scenarios will not be able to repeat themselves are accepted by us.
What do you think the biggest risk or danger is to Israel under the current strategy it's pursuing?
I would say that, again, this is a message that I think that should be understood all over the world. What is the real problem here? The problem is not only that Iran explicitly said again and again in the past 24 years that their primary goal is to eliminate Israel or to wipe Israel off the map, as they say it. This is an Israeli problem. It is not other people's problem. But the way that Iran is trying to achieve this goal is simple. They penetrate failed states in the region, Lebanon, Iraq, Syria, Yemen, and they plan to do it in some other countries. They built a pro-Iranian militias in these countries that are loyal to Iran and not to their own government. And actually, they create a cancer inside those countries. And by doing so, they actually torpedo, I would say, the very, very general principle of the existence of the United Nations or of the world after the Second World War that depends on full, let's say, autonomy and the sovereignty of nation states. And Iran is trying to change this kind of rules of the game. As I said, they do it quite successfully in 4 countries. The next countries that they plan to do very same things are Jordan, Sudan, maybe Bahrain. And this is something that might destabilize not only the Middle East, but the whole world. So it is time that the world will understand that in order to create stability and calm in this region, Iran should be told in a very clear way that their tactics of actually creating such a cancer inside countries in the Middle East cannot work. And the international community should convey such a message to Iran. And it cannot be only an Israeli, let's say, concern. It is something that naturally is a big concern for Saudi Arabia, Emirates, Bahrain, and many other countries in the region.
You mentioned the world there and getting the message about Israel's perspective across to it. President Biden has implied that he thinks that Israel should avoid striking Iranian nuclear facilities. Reportedly, his administration wasn't very happy with the fact that Hezbollah's leader was killed without advance notice being given to U.S. forces in the region so they could take defensive steps. What do you think the relationship is like between Benjamin Netanyahu and Joe Biden?
Well, unfortunately, the relations between Israel and the United States in this specific time are not as good as they should be. And we, along all our history, we had a lot of, let's say, debates and even disputes with the United States, but we did enjoy a lot of, I would say, credibility and respect from the Americans. Today, due to some, let's say, wrong behavior of our government, we suffer from mistrust of the Americans, which is a problem. But I'm saying that if the United States, and this is what I would do, if they can create a real credible threat toward Iran, and the Iranian Iran will begin to understand that the existence of their regime is in a real risk because the Americans will not tolerate their behavior, then we might save a military confrontation and might force Iran to agree to certain things that so far Iran did not agree to take. For instance, in order to reach stability in Lebanon, we have to dismantle the military capabilities of Hezbollah. Iran has to support it if they want to save their own, let's say, regime. This should be the American policy, and that's one of the things that we are trying to explain to Americans, not very successfully, I might say, but this is something that if you want to be harsh and strong and to, let's say, to create a real credible threat, you have to speak in the right language and not to only to press Israel to avoid taking military actions that are only, let's say, encouraging our enemies when they listen to these American messages.
General Eiland, thank you so much for joining us today.
You're most welcome.